Good evening, Bahamas. On the broadcast tonight. Another man gunned down here in the capital. Plus, a financial expert weighs in on the possible downgrade by Moody's. And fresh off his performances on the West Coast, Julian Believes sits down for a one-on-one.
Our news is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to our news, the weekend edition, and thanks for joining us. I'm Andrew Knowles. The Fox Hill community was the backdrop of the country's latest homicide last night. Gunshots rang out in the relatively quiet neighborhood of Johnson's Terrace around 9 p.m. Saturday. And when officers arrived on the scene, it was where they would discover a man's lifeless body.
The preliminary investigation is that sometime shortly after 9, he arrived here when he was accosted by unknown persons who opened fire on him, shooting him several times about the body. We, at this time, don't know the motive for this latest homicide. However, we are appealing to members of the public who resides in this area or persons who may have been passing at the time of this incident to feel free to contact the police at our emergency number 911 or 919 or the Central Detective Unit at 502-9991 or 2.
Officer in charge of the Central Detective Unit, Chief Superintendent Solomon Cash, was unable just to say just how many suspects were involved in the incident. Some relatives got emotional as their worst fears were confirmed and the victim was pronounced dead on the scene. As detectives combed the area looking for clues, several residents were outside curious as to what had just taken place in their community and watching in disbelief as the man's lifeless body was removed from the yard and carried away. And while there has appeared to be a lull in the frequency of murders happening here in the capital, Superintendent Cash says officers will continue to saturate these hotspot areas.
What I would say is that the police, we remain focused and looking at our prolific offenders, and we are maintaining our patrols in our hotspot areas to prevent such incidents from happening. However, it's unfortunate that tonight this incident happened.
Now also on the scene was President of the Bahamas Christian Council, Bishop Delton Fernander. Bishop Fernander says their presence on the scene was to simply show that they support the work of the Royal Bahamas Police Force.
We believe that crime is not an isolated incident, it is a community symptom. And as a council, we're going to be visible. We're going to be on our streets tonight. We're a part of working with the community, moving about and counseling those that were grieving. We have pastors in every community. We have churches in every community. This is what the community must do. We must come out of our churches. We must come out of our homes and be a part of the communities that are suffering. And so as council president, this is just the beginning of the visibility of the council, being out and present with our police force, supporting them in every aspect of crime prevention.
In other news tonight, opposition members say the government's public utterances on the dismal state of the economy is to blame for the decision by Moody's to consider a downgrade of the country's sovereign credit rating. But just how much of an impact did government's pronouncements really have on the ratings agencies coming to review? Well, President of the Bahamas Institute of Chartered Accountants and financial expert Gowan Bowe says Moody's typically does its annual reviews around this time, and no doubt the information they are gleaning from public disclosures are not positive pieces of information. And according to Bowe, that will be the basis of where they will begin discussions.
I believe when you stop and you give the news of your fiscal predicament, you also need to give the other side of saying, well, how am I going to turn that? And I believe one of the commentators said that whilst you have to be very honest and transparent in where you are, you also have to give a very clear indication that you have your hands on the reins. Right. That you are now going to steer this horse and buggy in a different direction, and you're going to demonstrate that there's a plan to do so.
While appearing as a guest on the show On the Record with host Jerome Sawyer, Bowe said in the 44 years since independence, governments have not done an effective job in properly articulating its action plans.
What we've missed as a country for many years, and like I said, going back almost from independence, certainly as I've been looking at it as a professional, a plan. Every year we get a budget statement that is pieces of paper that have line items on it. it doesn't give a clear indication of, well, what are the assumptions and estimates going into it? So what are you basing this revenue optimism on? What are you doing as it relates to expenditure? So I understand your priorities. We tend to, once a budget is allocated to a particular area, that continues into perpetuity, whether it's working or not. When we want to bring a new area, what do? We say we have to find more money. Well, as a government, no different than a business, you have to prioritize.
While government debt currently stands at $6.5 billion, Bill pointed to some things the Minister administration should have highlighted during the recent budget communication in order to begin to calm the fears of Moody's and even the average Bahamian.
A rating agency would say, well, now you've won the government, it should simply be a presenting of that plan. So what do you expect to see from a budget? How am I going to expand the economy? I say I'm going to do so, so what am I going to do? And there were some things laid out by the government in terms of money allocated to the venture fund, ease of doing business that they want to pay attention to. But what are the tangible steps? So when I start thinking about the venture fund, what businesses am I really looking to promote? So what industry,
yeah.
what criteria? Because, you know, Bahamians, when we hear that, it's free money.
Well, we'll take a break here, but still ahead tonight. Haitian migrants apprehended in Bahamian waters. That story and more when our news returns.